Sounds good. So, David, I think you wanted to do a quick intro.
Right. Okay. So, hello everyone, and welcome to this pilot, this prototype. What shall we call it? Of the new I4J Q&A series, and very happy to have Ben Baldwin to take on the kind of Chuck Yeager role of launching this series. And also to the man I'm so incredibly happy to have the fortune to call my partner and co-founder of I4J, Vint Cerf, who also is known as the Sarastro of the IP and TCP/IP protocol. So I'd like to just hand over to you, Ben, and let you take over from here, and I will enjoy the broadcast.
Great. Thanks, David. And welcome, everyone. I know we have a couple of special speakers or sponsors who will show up at the bottom of the screen, and more will enter as time goes on, but we also have a bunch of people viewing. The format here is, and we're going to try to stick to it as much as we can, but I've left a little bit of slush, is 60 minutes, so 5-minute intro of just speaking like this that gives people a chance to come in. Then Vint will talk for 20 minutes, and then there'll be 20 minutes Q&A, and I've left 15 minutes at the end, which will either be leaving early time or slush time for more Q&A. And I'm also looking at the chat on the right side of the screen, so if anybody's having trouble getting in, they can either email or send me a note in chat. Email may be more reliable, just because we're working with some new technology here. So I'll kick things off. So an official welcome to I4J's first interactive video presentation Q&A session with Vint Cerf, who is generally recognized as one of the fathers of the internet, as David was saying, and is Google's chief internet evangelist. Vint is going to talk about the next decade of the internet and how the nature of work is changing. So I think everyone would agree that there's no one more qualified to inform us on this topic. So this is really a great privilege. So I'm glad to be able to record this as well, so that we can watch it again. And the reason that I'm hosting this series, my name, by the way, is Ben Baldwin, and is because I think that this offers a new format for a very engaged group to further engage and do it in a real-time sense rather than having to be together. Because we're all across the world, so this gives us a really unique opportunity to recollect over something that's not just email. So I'm actually coming to you live from Toronto, Canada, care of the Mars Discovery District, one of the world's largest innovation hubs. A really interesting space here. And just as a quick background, some of you may know, but I'm the founder of a company called ClearFit, which is predictive analytics for hiring. And a while back, I demoed predictive job matching as a technology to the group a couple times. It went well enough that David asked if I'd be interested in helping others demo too. So I said yes. And I like the idea, as I said, of using live video. I was just sharing slides, but I think live video gives us a chance to get to know each other a little bit better and to take a step out of the ongoing conversations that are going on, pause, and kind of have a platform to speak from, where the speaker can share what they're working on in a formal and then informal way, and maybe even ask for help, a call to action to the group. So we're using today the Google Hangouts on our technology, and it lets 10 people speak, and then any number of people to watch, either in real time or they can watch the recording later. So we'll share the recording later, but I look forward to experiencing this. This is my first time with this technology as well. So feel free to participate using the chat feature, or as I said, you can send emails through to me, and I'll read those as well. So I'll get out of the way and turn it over to Vint. And so without further ado, take it away, Mr. Cerf.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, just because I was around the time that the internet was being developed doesn't necessarily mean that I have any clue more than the rest of you about what's going to happen in the next 10 years. certainly we didn't predict too well what was going to happen over the last 40, although we had great hopes that the internet would in fact have an impact, and I think everyone can agree that it has. It's opened up a lot of opportunities. But I'd like to explore a bit what the nature of work actually is, and so I'm going to switch over to my slide set, which I will share with you on the screen. Here it comes, and I hope everyone can see that. And if this thing is working correctly, I'll be able to go to the next slide, which it looks like we have. You should be seeing preliminaries. So the first one is Happy Fiscal New Year. It's October 1st, and indeed the Congress didn't shut down the government. So it is a Happy New Year, at least until December 11th, which is how long the continuing resolution lasts. The second thing is that all of us at I4J have been in the midst of discussing innovation and how it affects work and jobs, and there is one observation, which it both creates and destroys jobs. And one of the issues is which one, is it creating more jobs than it's destroying? And that, is not 100% clear. Historically, it's always created more jobs than it has destroyed, because as you introduce, like the Industrial Revolution did, new automation processes, somebody had to build the machines, somebody had to fix the machines, somebody had to program the machines, somebody had to learn and train and all this other stuff. So there's ancillary activity which takes place as you introduce new technology. There is an issue, however, which is on the next bullet here, and that's the people whose jobs have been removed as a result of new technology. Can they do the newly created jobs? And the answer may very well be that they are not prepared for that, in which case the next point is, how do I educate people for jobs that don't exist yet? And this is a real challenge, I think, for people who are in the business of education, because there's a fairly long pipeline. We start school in kindergarten, and we emerge typically from at least high school and maybe from a graduate school, and many years have gone by. And it's during that same period jobs keep changing, and the question is, how do the parties who are supposedly educating us, or how do we, who are supposedly learning something, prepare ourselves for jobs that don't exist yet? And I don't think I have good examples, good answers for this, except to speculate about the nature of learning. Now, the other thing which I think is very apparent is whether this term career planning makes any sense, especially if it's likely that the jobs that you are capable of doing as a consequence of initial education are not persistent over long periods of time. In which case, how do you plan for a career in which the jobs have changed and at which your skill set may be different from what the job requirements are? So this whole model of I get educated, I work, and I retire may in fact be dead. And it's the thesis of this presentation that we need to re-examine those questions in order to figure out whether there are better answers to them than we have today. So let me now move to some notions that I have derived from my experience with the I4J meetings. One of them, which David Nordfors is passionate about, is trying to fit work to people instead of trying to jam people into a particular job. And I think this is a very important possibility as this decade unfolds, that we might be able to do a better job. Of course, that means finding the right people and figuring out how to shape the jobs around them. And some of the things that Ben just mentioned in his ClearFit idea gives us some hints about what that mechanism might be. The second thing which I4J really highlighted for me is not that people are necessarily just looking for jobs that pay. Some of them just want to do work that they consider meaningful. I mean, why would you want to spend your time doing something, even if you're paid, if you didn't think it was meaningful? And some people feel like, well, I have to do it because it's the only way I can earn money. But in fact, the ideal outcome would be that everyone gets to do things they consider meaningful, and if they need it, they're compensated for it. And so I think finding meaningful work and creating meaningful work is still a very important paradigm for our future. The other question is whether education needs to be reinvented. When you think and when you hear the term classroom, you have a picture of desks all lined up in a very linear fashion, and there's somebody speaking at the front of the room, maybe with a whiteboard or projection system. And it feels to me as if there are many, many other avenues for learning things than that. And the idea that we have classrooms with people in them and a teacher and a bunch of students may turn out to be simply not the way things work. So the alternative is likely to be a kind of online environment where people might in fact be capable of learning not only in a school setting but at home and elsewhere. I'm going to stop the screen sharing for just 1 second in order to verify that I'm still alive and you can hear me. Can I get confirmation that because I noticed the camera was turned off while my screen was being shared. So can I get confirmation from Ben or David that it works and I was audible?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Otherwise,
However, the screen wasn't moving, so I started moving through slides.
Okay, fair enough. Oh, really? Is that right?
I'll switch control back to you. I had taken control for a second.
Oh, you took control from me. Well, I believe
you go.
I thought that that I was changing the slides, so that's a little odd. I am now trying to take control back, and you need to tell me whether I've succeeded or not. So this slide says Insights from I4J. Is that what you're seeing?
It's on the nature of work. You may have to open up.
Oh, there's something wrong because I'm seeing something else. Are you seeing changing slides right now?
No.
No. Okay, so there's something weird about this. In that case, do you want to try? I'm going to stop sharing for a minute because it looks. This is very strange. What about this? Can you see any difference?
Nope.
No, you're just seeing the first slide?
I'm just seeing the first slide. So why don't we do this?
Yeah, I stopped sharing. Boy, that's weird. We're all learning how to make this stuff work.
Not an issue. I have this. Tell me if this works for you, and then you can just tell me.
I can see preliminaries, so we want to go switch further down.
Can you see my screen sharing now?
I'm seeing, I think so. It says preliminaries on the screen.
Can you see Insights from I4J?
That's not what I'm seeing. The thing I'm seeing right now says now I'm seeing Insights from I4J. Yes, preliminaries. Engelbart's vision. Yes. Okay, it's working.
Okay.
So now we had just talked about this last bullet, which said, "Is it time to reinvent education?" The last bullet on this slide says. And this is something David Nordfors has emphasized articulately, and that is that unemployed people are assets, not liabilities. We should be disrupting unemployment. We should look forward to putting people to work. Let's go to the next slide, Engelbart's vision. And I'm relying on Ben to do that. There we go. So some of you will know that Doug Engelbart ran the Augmentation Center at SRI International for many years. His idea was that computers would help people work. And he wanted very much to find ways of making knowledge work key to our future. He believed that collaboration was a key to future enterprise. And the idea that that we discover, process, and repurpose information in the world that we live in today, including the one that we're using right now, is the basis for a lot of 21st century work. And I think Engelbart saw this even in the 20th century, even in the middle of the 20th, in the 50s and 60s. So his contribution to this vision, I think, was very powerful. In fact, if he were alive now, sadly he's not, but I think the big debate about artificial intelligence and how scary it is, I think Engelbart would argue against that and say no, that artificial intelligence is something that can augment our capabilities and that we should treat this as something which is useful and an adjunct to our own capacity. Certainly every time you do a Google search, there's a whole lot of AI going on to try to get the answers that you're looking for. And certainly if our self-driving cars, there's plenty of AI in that setting. Image recognition and so on, speech understanding, translation is all part of the AI envelope. And so I don't think this needs to be scary at all. If anything, we should embrace this idea. And finally, collaboration tools can really accelerate work. And just to use the Hangouts and the Google Docs for a moment, I've had many situations where I've worked with a group of people to compose a piece of text or a document. And on Hangouts, we can see each other and hear each other, and we can bring up and share a document from the Google Drive. Everyone can see everything that anybody is doing. So if you're typing, you can see what the other person is typing. There can be simultaneous editing of a document. There are icons for each of the participants in the discussion. If somebody says, "What do you think of this?" If you click on their icon, it takes the screen that you're looking at to the place where that person's cursor currently is in the document. And I've watched very rapid closure in the preparation of documents as a consequence of everyone being able to see the same thing at the same time, interacting with each other, trying out ideas. So I see that Ben is carefully forcing me ahead here by moving. This is a bad thing about the other guy in charge of the slides, by the way. Just keep that in mind. No, it's all right. Go ahead. It was actually timely to get to this collaborative information sharing. And let me give you some examples of things that I consider to fall into this space. One of them is this open source software, and I would remind you that the reason the World Wide Web took off so quickly is that everyone can see everyone else's HTML. If you run a browser and said show source, you could see how someone had managed to get a particular effect using HTML on that web page, and so everybody learned from everybody else. Wikipedia is a similar kind of thing, and it's true, we get into collisions and there's, the dispute pages and all that stuff. But I would still argue that Wikipedia's aggregation of information has been extraordinary, and even though sometimes when you look at something you know about and there are errors, it still is a wonderful source of information and vastly bigger than any other encyclopedia ever written. Things like web pages and video and social media have a problem. There's a low signal to noise ratio there. And so you do have the problem of having to filter all the stuff that's showing up in your, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or something else. But it is an information sharing environment. It's just that the signal ratio may be a little low. Search engines are another implicit way of sharing information by going and finding things that you think are of interest and relevant to what you're trying to do. 3D printing is a kind of an interesting collaboration because in this case it takes the design of something, distributes the design to the edges of the network, and then you literally print the object, possibly with some assembly required. But this is different from the usual thing where you bring raw materials to one place, you produce something and ship it to the target. Now the target has all the raw materials, you ship the design. And that's the sharing part of this, information sharing part of this. And then finally there's analytics and big data. And again, this is a collaborative in the sense that a lot of the data is produced by very collaborative activity and collection. And finally the analytics may in fact be produced by multiple parties trying things out, looking at the data, and finding algorithms, for example, to process and present it. So let's go to the next slide. I know I'm supposed to get done soon here. Intellectual property is what I consider to be a fairly serious challenge right now. In my view, copyright is off the rails. Part of the reason for this is that now copyrights last for 75 years after the death of the author, and I think that's just simply too long. And there are people who now treat links to something as somehow copyright infringement. I mean, it's just an excessive reaction of the intellectual property community, in my opinion. It's not that they shouldn't have their property protected. That's not my argument. But I think that there were two parts to the copyright material in our Constitution. It said the producer of this intellectual property should enjoy its benefits for a finite period of time. In the case of copyright, it was originally 14 years. If you were still alive at the end of the 14 years and you made a payment, you could get another 14, and then that was it. After that, it became part of the public domain. And I have to say that the copyright community has focused largely on extending the period of time of benefit and ignoring the whole public domain notion, which was supposed to benefit the public. So I think we need to rethink that. And I'll have to tell you that on the software patent side, I would rant for hours. I won't. But this is trolling heaven or hell, depending on your point of view. If you're a patent troll, it's wonderful, and if you're not, it's awful. I think that too many patents are granted with too little diligence, and part of the problem is that software patents in particular require a considerable depth of expertise and currency, understanding what is normal or let's say not innovative for someone skilled in the art. And I think many of the examiners simply don't have the capacity to understand what is or isn't novel. The barrier is too low. And either we have to raise the barrier in order to allow patents to issue for things that are truly innovative, or we have to reconsider whether software should be patented. Some of you listening will know that it was not for some time. I don't think it was until the kind of late in the 20th century that software patents were in fact granted. Let's go to the next slide. That hasn't happened. There we go. Okay. So as far as looking towards the internet future goes, there are trends that are obvious to almost everyone on the call. There's higher and higher speeds, both on the wireless and the wired side. There are satellite ideas and running programs, the O3B program, Other 3B, which the 8,000-kilometer satellites can reach literally everywhere on the surface of the Earth. There are other entities that are interested in similar kinds of efforts, maybe even at larger scale. SpaceX and Facebook have both spoken of that. Google has been experimenting with balloons at 60,000 feet. So there are all kinds of access methods coming along. Mobiles are everywhere, and they are becoming increasingly powerful. They are becoming the means by which lots of other devices get access to the rest of the internet. They are becoming controllers, in addition to being access controllers, where credentials can be held and exposed at the appropriate time, payments and all kinds of applications. So they're with us. And now, of course, the Internet of Everything. And here I think we have both lots of jobs coming, because there's a huge amount of work to make this work safely and securely and with privacy in mind. So there's going to be a lot of configuration that has to be dealt with. This has to work on a large scale. People will have many devices at home and on their person and in the car and in the office. If they ever move from one house to another, it's going to be a reconfiguration nightmare. 100 devices that you bring into the house that already has 100 devices in it. And then you don't want to spend the entire afternoon typing IPv6 addresses into your laptop. So we're going to have to figure out how to do this safely and securely so the 15-year-old next door doesn't configure your devices into his control, and vice versa. You don't want to accidentally mess up your neighbors. So there's lots of work to be done on strong authentication and cryptography for privacy. And the line there that says challenges for safety, security, and privacy is an implicit element of this Internet of Things. Finally, I think it's very important to recognize how deeply dependent we are on software. This is going to be work for lots of people to produce software, but more important, I think, is whether or not they are liable for bad software, for bugs, or literally for malware. I think our legal system has not yet caught up with the kind of damage that can be done with bad software. And I think that our social intuitions have not caught up with the kinds of things that we can do with our various devices, our phones that take pictures, which we upload to the net, etc. And so we still have a certain amount of social maturity to gain for the things that we use. And the last slide is recommended reading for those of you who might be interested in pursuing this further. The first one is something I recommend everyone read. It's called The Machine Stops, and it was written in 1909. It's about a society in which every person lives in their homes. They never leave the home. Food is delivered to them. They communicate with each other through this vast network, and they never leave the house. And it sounds like, you know, being on the internet and having drones deliver food and everything else, which sounds awfully familiar to a 21st century mind. And of course, in this particular scenario, one day the machine stops working. And the question is, what happens to that society? And I will leave it to you to go read this. It's fairly short. Herbert Simon, the Nobel Prize winner in economics, wrote a book quite a long time ago called The Sciences of the Artificial. And this is all about the artifacts that we create. In our case right now, I'm thinking more of software than anything else. Jim Clifton's written a book called The Coming Job Wars, and this was distributed at one of the I4J meetings. This is another very thoughtful examination of people, their fit with jobs, and the way in which both companies and countries are interacting with each other and maybe even conflicting with each other over where jobs are and what those jobs are. Steve Denning, who's been extremely active in the I4J distribution list, has written a number of books. The one that really got my attention was The Leader's Guide to Radical Management, and I recommend that to you. And finally, Kurt Carlson, who's written a book called Innovation, the 5 Disciplines for Creating What Customers Want. Kurt is another extraordinarily active participant in the I4J discussions. He led SRI International for many years. And is not only authoritative, but he's also very articulate about the notions of using innovation effectively. So I will stop there and hope that that this is sufficient to stimulate further discussion, or alternatively, we put everybody to sleep, Ben. So we're about to find out.
All right, thank you very much, Vint. And I know we were having some technical difficulties getting the right people's personal versus work emails and into the chat, out of the chat. I see that Robert's just joined us. And so those who have muted their microphones, you can take your microphones off and ask Vint questions. So I'll turn it over to either David, Derek, Monique, or Robert. You're popping in and out. Do you have any questions? I'll mute myself for a bit. I have tons, but I'll turn it over to you to ask any questions that you have.
Yeah, this is Monique. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Monique. Go ahead.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank the team for actually enabling me to this morning, all things equal. Listen, Vint, a few questions I have, especially to the point around the Internet and the Internet of Things. What are your thoughts around privacy by design? What does that look like? And the other notion is we talk about large amount of things. I mean, we can debate the numbers, but it's a lot. What are the implications of that construct to scaling the Internet per se? Because I think as a person who cares deeply and one of the founders of the Internet, creators of the Internet, surely that's going to have a lot of implications. You know, I think this is what are we dealing with in terms of these things coming onto the Internet, and also the notion of privacy by design, because it's a fine line between privacy, as we know it, and to do it by design, and also security. And I think security is also one of the top of mind issues, as one could imagine. And obviously this will have all kinds of implications to talent and to skills if we think about it. Would you agree?
Well, yes.
Before you respond, Monique, if you could just introduce yourself just really quickly.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm Monique Morrow. No problem.
We're interested.
No, absolutely. Well, Vint and I are good friends. I'm Monique Morrow, and I'm the CTO of New Frontiers in Engineering at Cisco.
So thank you very much for joining us, Monique, and thank you for a very thoughtful couple of questions. Let me start out by emphasizing, as I did in the slides, that security, safety, and privacy are all very, very important in this space. They are not all the same thing. You want that devices that are part of the Internet of Things to be safe to use. And so I think this is, again, by design. You want privacy by design, security, and safety by design. And so the first thing I would worry about is safety. The second thing, on the privacy side, this is really critical because so much of the data that might be accumulated by these devices, which might look innocent on the surface, might in fact be quite revealing. Here's a simple example. I have sensors in the house that are running an IPv6 radio-based network, which in fact is made by a company called Archrock, which was acquired by Cisco. These things run for nearly a year on the 2 little AA batteries. They form a self-forming network, and in my case, they sample data, the light levels, humidity, and temperature in each room in the house every 5 minutes. Now, that gets stored away in a server in my basement. Imagine someone else getting access to that data. Just take the temperature data, for example. If you could track temperature every 5 minutes in the house, after a period of months maybe, you might actually figure out, well, how many people live in that place, what rooms do they tend to occupy, what is their diurnal pattern, and a criminal would be very interested in that. And so your first thought is, wow, I hope I can keep anybody from getting access to that. On the other hand, if the house is on fire, and the fire department shows up, one of the things that might be very useful for them is to figure out, where are the people? Is there, maybe they're even unconscious, but can I figure out what rooms they're in based on any information I might gather from the sensor system, assuming it hasn't already destroyed itself? And so we have this tension between safety and privacy. And so, again, this is going to take a certain amount of care. We have to figure out, well, how do I authorize people to get access to these things when I want them to get it? And how do I inhibit that access when I don't want them to get it? And how do I control that as opposed to some third party? There are cases where I might want a third party to actually have access to and control over some of my systems at home. Maybe it's the entertainment system, for example. But I don't want the 15-year-old next door to get access to that. So I have to have the ability to make strongly authenticated authorizations. The devices themselves need to decide with what other devices are they willing to communicate, or are you willing for them to communicate. And those devices basically have to reject any attempt to communicate which they don't consider authentic. And so now strong authentication, digital signatures, certificates, and so on may turn out to be absolutely essential to making this work. You asked about, and crypto, by the way, of course, is important with regard to confidentiality. The safety and security has a lot to do with whether the devices have trusted computing components in them which resist invasion and modification of the software in an unauthorized way. You asked about the number of devices and the impact on the net. There's no question in my mind that there will be an increased demand for communication, although many of these devices won't really require very many bits per second. If just temperature samples or other simple things like that, we're only talking a few bits a second. But with large numbers of devices, communications demand could be significant. I think the configuration problem, the safety and security problems are far more overwhelming technically than the problem of sort of scaling the network to deal with all these. In fact, a lot of the communication may be quite local, in which case the internet itself is not broadly affected by too much traffic flowing back and forth because all of it's more or less confined. So that's my reaction, Monique. Go ahead.
Just a follow-up, and I do subscribe to quite a bit of what you just said, Vint. I think the issue about privacy, I'll go back to the privacy by design and safety and security, and of course they're all puzzle pieces, if you will, but and there's some are very, very key to this topic, especially around the internet. I believe at what point of responsibility do we all have in the industry to educate the consumer?
Oh,
because I don't, and I do believe, and the answer is an obvious yes, but I do believe that the consumer is not so in tune into some of these issues, especially when we're talking about wearables and we're talking about, then you can step it up into other areas where you don't know what the implications are when you're sending pulses of information out. So it's just interesting because then you can talk about machine readable formats because contracts become very, very laborious to read, I agree after so many pages. So I'm just kind of putting it up into several, aggregating it up into several themes here, if you will. The consumer, how is the consumer aware? How are we actually educating the consumer, et cetera, to all of the implications that we're talking about here, especially around privacy, security, and in the end, the consumer is sort of a walking API, if you will, right?
So, two things. First of all, I think educating consumers is always a good thing. An educated consumer is better than an uneducated one. On the other hand, we can't use that as a substitute for taking responsibility for safety, security, privacy,
Yep.
and oh, by the way, accessibility, which we didn't talk about, but that's another huge design challenge. And we need.
Oh, I met one of your accessibility engineers and patent attorneys who is blind, and I think we need to actually, at Google, and he's quite impressive, Jack Chen. I think we absolutely
That's
have
Jack.
to make
That's
our
right.
we absolutely have to make our tools absolutely accessible. I agree.
So it's a huge challenge, especially when you have embedded devices. I mean, Cisco has
Hmm.
lots of experience with embedding things in other things, and often the interfaces are not visible. Maybe you have to use your mobile as a way of getting access to the embedded device. So there are a variety of challenges along those lines. I do think, however, that we owe it to consumers uh, to help them. So, for example, if we said, a big red screen pops up on your laptop and it says, "You have an infection,"
Hmm.
in your computer. And what the user wants is a WTF button that they can push. What do I do? And if we say, I don't know, but you're infected, that's not a good answer. We have to have answers for people. We can lay responsibility on them. Use two-factor authentication. Don't use dumb passwords, usernames, and
Hmm.
passwords. But we need to give them things to react to or react with or take action with. Otherwise, educating them will only frustrate them because we will have a highly educated and highly frustrated user who says, you haven't given me any tools to protect myself. And so that lays a real burden on us at Google, on you at Cisco, and elsewhere to provide those tools and provide that advice. At one point, I was thinking maybe we should have a cyber fire department so that you could call the cyber fire department if you had a problem, like your computer is metaphorically burning up, and say, help, help, I don't know what to do. We in the private sector, I think we have quite a broad range of skill sets with regard to responses to cyber problems, and we don't always have a place to turn. So Ben, I can tell that we're starting to run short of time, so I should get the next discussion going here.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'd like to add a question if I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. So I'm thinking here that I have some kind of digital representation. All people have that. You could imagine that you would take all the data in my computer, social could virtually create a copy of it. Right? So the question is, what if we could find an architecture where I own myself, so that instead of me spreading out my data everywhere, I have somebody who stores all my data, and then companies like Google or whoever else interact with that through APIs. And this way, maybe one could construct models so that all the money that is created with my contacting marketers and so on, that I could get a slice of that by just being me. I mean, that would be a way of working. But could one envision such an architecture?
Well, I think, David, some parts of that already exist. If you look at what goes on in a lot of the cloud computing environments, they are prepared to receive substantial amounts of data from users, from third-party sources or directly from the users, to run analytic software against that data, to let the users invent their own analytic software. And it might very well be that if someone creates an application that gets access to the data through the API, I mean, Bigtable would be an example of that historically at Google, and now there are follow-on kinds of techniques that are even broader in scale. You can imagine people monetizing their ability to do analytics on behalf of other people, or to give them access to the tool and not necessarily give the tool maker access to that user's data, which I think is very important for privacy reasons. So I think this could very well be a space in which a creative individual might have the ability to monetize his or her skills on the analytics side.
Yeah, I'd like to let in Robert here. I see that he He's online. It's coming and going. Hey, Robert.
Oh, we're not hearing anything.
Oh, well.
Robert, are you there?
I'm not sure.
He's been is switching in and out. We'll have to figure out what might have interfered
Robert,
with
if you
his
can hear us,
ability.
if you want, you can send me an email with your question. I can ask Vint directly.
Oh, yeah, that would be good. Were we anticipating? Oh, there goes Robert again.
So
Were we expecting other people? And Ben, maybe Ben, you have some questions that.
Yeah. So I know some people. Everybody wants to know about robots,
Ah,
right? So how do robots and AI and the blending of, you know, the paranoia, the science fiction, what's reality, what is AI, who's going to rule those sorts of questions? Although they seem pretty theatrical, they're a topic that we talk about quite a bit. So I'm interested in your perspective on that, because it's a
So, Ben, this is actually quite an interesting question, and the reason it's interesting is that although when you asked it, I'm pretty sure you had in your mind the notion of a mechanical robot, you know, the hulking, you know, humanoid thing that's going clunk clunk. But I would like to posit, this is controversial, I'd like to posit that there are a lot of things that we should think of as robots, even though we don't. An example of this would be a program trading thing in the stock market. It's a program that takes input from the real world, it does something, and it causes real world actions to happen, even though it's not cyber physical. And so, I don't mean to get into a big argument, but I just want to say that the notion of robot here could be quite broad. The second observation is that AI is not just robotics, but robotics is certainly a very powerful part of AI. At Google, we've made a fairly significant investment in a number of AI companies, or I'm sorry, robotics companies, including Boston Dynamics, which is an extraordinary operation which had been doing a lot of very interesting work for DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. I think that most of us, well, let me just speak for myself. I think that most of the robotic ideas that I see coming along are intended to augment our capability, to help us to be, for example, there's Robonaut, which is a NASA-sponsored and GM-sponsored humaniform robot. The idea is that it can handle the same tools as ordinary humans. And this is better than having to have specially fitted pieces of equipment to do particular functions. DARPA just had a robotics challenge, and on the net there'll be a number of YouTube videos showing how these humaniform robots tried to perform a series of tasks. One of them was to drive a car and then get out and open a door and walk up the stairs, or maybe it was walk up the stairs and open the door. And I have to tell you, I watched these videos and I watched the robots failing, and I felt sorry for them. I mean, there's no rationale for that, but it was, you know, these poor guys, you know, they would drive up, open the door, and then fall over, or you know, they'd go up and try to lever the doorknob open, and the whole body would tilt, and then they'd fall over. It was funny and sad in a way, and I felt sorry for the robot that was having trouble performing these functions. So when you look at all that, you come to the general conclusion that maybe this isn't so much of a threat, at least not in the near term. I see that Robert has asked the question, so maybe we should go on to that since we are going to only have about 12 minutes left here. Robert says, we are developing some technology with LinkedIn to improve matching of people to opportunities as part of our Rework America Connected initiative. And you go to www.reworkamericaconnected.org. That's Rework America Connected is all one word, .org. The lack of good data from employers is a key issue to understand the jobs and skills that will be needed in the future. What is the potential of technology in the few years ahead to do a much better job of matching people to good opportunities? We're working hard at this. So, Robert, that's a great question. Let me tell you that the answer to your question is important for a different reason than the one that you might have intended. And the reason is that the rate of change of jobs, especially in the high-tech space, is of vital interest and concern. when we're trying to figure out how to prepare people for a potentially very dynamic, changing job environment. What kinds of things should they learn? What capabilities should they have to adapt? And so I've been trying to get information out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics and finding that they are looking more backwards than forwards. Their data doesn't change very often. I've been trying to measure how quickly are jobs changing. It would be wonderful to get some idea from the companies what kinds of jobs they have now, what did they have before, and what do they anticipate later, so we can actually tell people, listen, the job changes are very rapid. You need to learn how to adapt. Learning a particular skill is not the way in which you might have a lifetime of work. It's learning new skills that's important for a lifetime of work. The other thing is that you can't tell a whole lot from job descriptions, as near as I can tell. You know, you read them, and it doesn't really give you a sense for what the day is like. You almost want to have a little video clip where somebody who's doing the job says, and this is what my day is like. Of course, there are some companies who probably don't want to publicize that. But it might give you a much clearer sense than reading a job description of what work is needed and what skill sets are needed. So I really wish you well in this. There's one other organization that is doing something that is sort of related. It's called Volunteer Match. And they are trying to help people discover where there are volunteer opportunities in various locales around the country. So you go to the map, you click on the city, and you say, what's going on that I could do? This is another attempt to match up people's capacities with the possibility of doing something meaningful. So I don't have a magic wand here either, but I'm very excited about what you're trying to do, especially given that we know that the markets that are coming along are going to be so full of change. I see there's a little additional thing. Let's see, question from Peter. Oh, first of all, Robert, if that wasn't an adequate answer, you should feel free to send another email, and David will beat me over the head. Let's see. We've got a question from Peter Vander Alvera. I hope I've not mangled your name badly, from Swift. What is the opportunity for banks in the disrupted unemployment scenario? Wow, what a thought-provoking question that is. I think banks are in the midst of quite a dramatic change. We're shifting the way in which we move value around, and I'm not really referring to Bitcoin, which I still think is sort of too chancy when it comes to the value of the Bitcoins and their variation. It's more like a commodity, and the last thing I want is to receive my payment for work in commodities like pork bellies or something. So Bitcoin for me is a little weird. On the other hand, the blockchain idea has some interesting pieces to it. The banks are, of course, a key place where transactions are recorded. And it's really critical that we have ways of assuring that information about various transactions, about your accounts and everything else, is accurate and retained securely. The bank that figures out how to do this in a more distributed way may turn out to open up new opportunities for supporting commerce than we have today. So after all, if you look at what a bank does, it's just mostly managing information and making sure that distributed data is accurate, that is to say that it's all in sync. And that's the most important job that it has. So I'm very interested in seeing how people are compensated. You do know, I think, that the use of mobiles to transfer money as opposed to cash, it turns out to have made a big difference in some countries where there's a lot of corruption, because the electronic transfer literally goes around all the people who might otherwise take their bit, and people end up actually getting the money that they are due in consequence of this electronic transaction. So I'm pretty excited about the banks being able to serve in a role more effective than today, especially when we start thinking about various kinds of micropayments and related things like that.
Very interesting. Now, I think we're getting pretty close to the end of our time. Monique, you have any last questions for the group?
No, it's I think it's just all thought-provoking. In the end, my thesis is that we're going to, all things equal, I think the skills that are going to be of the future are going to be all around cybersecurity and what we do in this space. I think it's just going to be tantamount, and this will represent opportunities for a lot of people to reskill in that area and or, even study in that area. But for me, the future is going to be, especially in this correlation of the internet, cybersecurity will be most pivotal.
So I'd like to respond to Monique's observation, with which I concur. The one thing that I believe we have failed at and what must succeed at if we are to achieve any kind of security, safety, and privacy is to do a better job of writing software that doesn't have so many bugs, because it's the bugs that are exploited, and our ability to avoid making software that is exploitable is vital to this whole enterprise. And so if there's any serious research to be done, it's that. How do I create an environment where I can write software that has a lower probability of having exploitable bugs than today? And this means, new languages. There's TLA+, there's COQ, pronounced cock, by the way, which is very disturbing in various and sundry contexts, but it's French, and so there you go. The idea, though, is that we should be able to develop tools that will allow a programmer to say, for example, please confirm for me that there are no buffer overflow possibilities in this code. And it should be possible to say that and have the system come back and say, I agree, I don't see any, or I found a counterexample and you need to fix it. If we don't do that, I think our cybersecurity efforts will be weakened dramatically, because we will still be facing all the bugs that are being exploited.
Yep.
Very interesting. Well, I think we're coming to a close now, but I have one last question for you, Vint. Thank you very much, first off, for your time, and everybody for listening. Do you have any requests of us, and the us being I4J and anybody watching? Do you have a call to action that you'd like to communicate?
Well, thank you for asking, Ben. I'm not sure whether it's a call for action as much as it is a request for insight. I tried to relay a few of the things that I took away from my I4J interactions, but we are living in a time of great change. And the people who participate in this discussion and others can help us see what's going on, because they have so many different perspectives. And so my call for action is to join the I4J discussion. Help us all collectively understand what's going on and how we can make for a better society, one in which meaningful work is the norm as opposed to the unusual.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Vint, and thank you, everybody, once again. Stay tuned for the next video session, and we worked out a lot of kinks today. Hopefully it'll be much more smoother next time. And I know there was a little difficulty seeing the slide deck, so we can email that about following the closure of this. But and then, of course, please let me know if there's anybody who is part of the I4J group or would like to be part of the I4J group, and you want to present. Very interesting sort of platform that we have here. So you can reach me through my Google Plus account, which is broadcasting this this video broadcast right now. It's benjamin.s.baldwin@gmail.com, or of course anyone at I4J, and we'd be happy to get back to you and get you engaged. So thank you, everybody. And this is broadcast number 1. Hopefully there'll be many as time goes on.
Thanks so much, Ben. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Well done, everyone.
See you on the net.
See you there.